Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our first webinar of 2024. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jen Jones, the CEO of Galapagos Conservation Trust, and I'm really excited today to be joined by Jeff Dawson, a colleague and good friend from Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust. Today, we're going to be hearing some really exciting updates from the Floriana Restoration Program. This is an initiative that GCT has been supporting for nearly 2 decades, and so we are really excited to hear the latest from the field from Jeff. But before we get going, I have two points to raise. Firstly, at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a Q&A box. You can use that to submit your questions whilst Jeff is speaking, and then after the talk, we'll do our best to ask as many of them as we can. If we don't get around to any, we'll try and follow up by email for you all. And secondly, we are really excited to share with you today that today is our first day of our Big Give Green Match Fund campaign, where we are aiming to raise a decent amount of money for programs just like Floriana. So our rewilding work in Galapagos with all of the dedicated partners out there trying to restore the biodiversity of the islands and support communities to live in harmony with nature. In this week, so just for 7 days, any donation will be doubled. So if you give £10, we'll get £20. If you give £100, we'll get £200. You get the idea. So please, if any of you are able to help, we would really appreciate that. And also, it's really worth visiting our crowdfunder page because we were very lucky to receive a video from Stephen Fry helping us to promote this appeal. So I definitely recommend watching that video. So yeah, that brings me on to introducing Jeff. Well, I'll let you introduce yourself any more than that. And I'll be back when we're asking questions a bit later. So thanks for joining us, Jeff.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jen. Hi, everybody. Nice for you to join. Yeah, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay. Now, I'm hoping everyone can see that. I'm going to ask if you can't, then Jen will probably tell me. But yeah, no, thank you very much for the welcome, Jen. Yes, my name's Jeff Dawson. I'm Field Programs Manager with Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust. And as part of that, I manage our global programs in the Caribbean, Galapagos, aspects of Madagascar, as well as our global amphibian program. And Jen's and GCT have kind of asked me to give a presentation, kind of an update on where we are with the Floriana Restoration Program, as I was over there in February for a few weeks. So that's what the talk's going to be on. Hopefully it'll be about half an hour. And then there'll be time for questions afterwards. So I'm just going to start off just by saying who all the partners are. Obviously, you're here because of, you know, GCT, maybe members, and I myself work for Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust. But this program, Floriana program, is a huge program and has a whole range of partners involved in it. And I think I've tried to get most of them or all of them here. So it's led by the Galapagos National Parks, and obviously supported by the government of Ecuador through the Ministry of Environment and the Agency of Biosecurity Agency of the Galapagos, as well as the Floriana community themselves, who are integral to this project. Fundación Jocotoco are the lead local NGO, leading a lot of the aspects. And then a whole host of other international and national NGOs supporting them. So, for example, Island Conservation, GCT, Galapagos Conservancy, the Charles Darwin Foundation, Durrell, the University of Vienna, and the Konrad Lorenz Research Centre, Houston Zoo, and Rewild. And I do apologise if there's any others I've missed off there. So, briefly, for those of you who don't know, Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust, who I work with, was founded in 1963 by the author and naturalist Gerald Durrell, and we're based at Jersey Zoo on the island of Jersey in the British Channel Islands. We work globally around the world, predominantly on islands, with large projects in Madagascar, Mauritius, the Caribbean, India and Brazil. And we've been working in Galapagos since about 2007. and have been involved in the Floriana program since around 2013, 2014. Now, I'm sure lots of you know a lot about the Galapagos and know about Floriana, but I'm assuming that there might be some people on this call who don't. So I'm just going to give a little brief overview of Floriana. You can see it there in the red circle. It's the southernmost island in the Galapagos archipelago. And it's about a couple of hours south by boat from Santa Cruz, the main island. It's 171 square kilometers in size, about 17,000 hectares, and it has a permanent population of around about 130 people. To give you an idea, it's about half the size of the Isle of Wight. Was one of the kind of relationships I found. Most people live in the town, which is Puerto Velasco Ibarra, and in the highlands, kind of in this central area, is where a lot of the farms and everything are. So Floriana itself is kind of characterized by two broad habitat types. In the lowlands, which kind of go from around sea level to around 300 meters, is the dry zone. It tends to be hot, very hot, dry, characterized by dense, scrubby, thorny vegetation. And that's the largest kind of vegetation type on the island. And then in the highlands, usually around above 400 meters above sea level, is the humid zone. So characterized by glacier forest, tends to be much cooler and wetter than the lowlands, and is also the major and main agricultural zone on the island. And then in between the two, there's what's called the transition zone, where you'll see this gradual transition from that lowland dry vegetation to the more upland, wet, humid glacier forest. As with most islands, or all the islands in Galapagos rather, it's got a host of endemic and unique wildlife, including this little guy who is a medium tree finch. This is one of the Darwin's finch species, and it's an island endemic to Floriana, listed as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List, threatened species, and it's restricted to the islands. Now, Floriana was one of the first islands to be colonized and populated by people, and as such has a host of introduced species. This means that a number of species that used to be found on the island have disappeared from it, including the Floriana mockingbird, which is in the top there, and the Floriana racer, which are now restricted to these two offshore islands of Champion and Gardner. So that's kind of a very quick overview of Floriana. Kind of prep up, I'm going to give a little bit of brief history to the Floriana program. And this is a brief history, so I do apologize if there are things that people know about that I've missed out. So as I said, lots of invasive mammals, predominantly, as well as plants and birds on Floriana. Two of the invasive ungulates, the feral goats and donkeys, were removed from Floriana in the late 2000s. And obviously with the removal of these ungulates, that enabled vegetation to come back on the island. And then following that, in 2012, the Galapagos National Parks requested island conservation to undertake a feasibility study for the eradication of invasive rats, mice, and cats from Floriana. There's a large number of rats and mice on the island, as well as damaging crops and agricultural production, are also a barrier to the re-establishment of some of those missing species to the mainland. That was in 2012, and that was coming off the back of several successful rodent eradications in Galapagos. So Bartolome and Rabida, you can see on the map in the top right corner there, I've kind of labeled them by the letters, were successfully eradicated of rodents in 2011. And then Pinzon, characterized by that letter P, was successfully eradicated of rats in 2012. And then at the time, I think that was the fourth largest island in the world that had been eradicated of rodents. And this was, it really is useful because it built up kind of expertise within the archipelago, within the region. At the time the feasibility study was undertaken, the largest island in the world to have been eradicated from all 3 species, so that's rats, mice, and feral cats, was the subantarctic island of Macquarie Island, which you can see circled in red on that bottom map, so below New Zealand and Tasmania. The conclusion from this study was that whilst challenging, because Floriana is both a tropical island and also inhabited, none of the other islands that have been eradicated of rodents were inhabited, but it was considered challenging but feasible, both from a technical perspective, so having the technology to undertake it, but also from a social and environmental perspective. So would be socially viable and not environmentally damaging to do so. Now, post that, a lot of work was subsequently done, kind of to fine-tune kind of the methods and looking at how things would work in that local context. Additionally, activities were done in 2015-16 to review and peer review the impact on non-target species. So, as sure many of you know, I'll tell you during this talk, the primary method for the eradication of rodents and feral cats on islands is through poison bait. So it's important to consider what impact this poison bait could have on native non-target species, so the species you're not wanting to target. And then in 2017, there was a non-target species mitigation workshop in Galapagos involving all the partners, and from that we identified 6 species for which mitigation measures should be implemented due to the risks to them from the baiting operation. And these were 5 species of Darwin's finch and the short-eared owl. Around similar time, a GCT project came on board, which helped develop and build the biosecurity capacity within the Galapagos more broadly, and set about creating some of those enabling environmental and social conditions for the restoration of islands in the archipelago, including Floriana. Alongside this, a huge amount of work going on with the local community, consultations to make them aware of the processes, bring them on board and get their support, because of course none of this would work without the support and cooperation of the local communities. And then really it was 2018, towards the end of 2018, that we kind of started putting in place all the mitigation activities for what would ultimately be the eradication attempt. And that's what I'm just going to talk over now, is those mitigation measures. The first one to touch on briefly was around agriculture. As I said, there's a human population living on Floriana. They grow crops, they have livestock, and one of the things you don't want is for livestock to be eating bait when it's dropped. So as part of this, work was done with the farmers to construct piggeries, cattle sheds, chicken coops, which will not only help protect the livestock during the baiting operation, but also help with livestock production and management post-project. So is providing kind of long-term infrastructure and support to the local community. And all the local community work within Floriana is now being led by Fundación Jocotoco. Alongside this work, in tandem with this host of kind of work to improve agricultural practices and harvest management on Floriana, they're working with farmers there, because once the rats have been removed, then productivity should increase massively. And today, about 30%, so 40 people, 30% of the population have been trained in these various techniques. In this photo, you can see this is one of the chicken coops that was constructed as part of the mitigation measures for the baiting operation, cattle sheds and piggeries. The other first species for which mitigation measures were identified were short-eared owls. Short-tailed owls live across the archipelago, and there's a population on Floriana, although it's a bit complicated as they do move frequently between islands. Of course, owls, unsurprisingly, would be vulnerable to the poison bait as they eat rodents, vertebrates, and lizards, so quite easily consume animals which had consumed bait and therefore be impacted by it themselves. So on this, 64 owls were caught on Floriana between July and September in 2023. They were initially housed in a temporary aviary on Floriana before being transported by boat to Santa Cruz, where they're held in aviaries there. And they're going to remain in captivity for a few years. The reason for this is that even though the bait will have broken down and disappeared in the environment, or has done already in Floriana, there is something that's called bioaccumulation. So the bait would be eaten by invertebrates, reptiles which aren't impacted by it, but will accumulate in their tissues. And so there's still a risk for predatory animals such as owls to be released back. So this is an example of inside one of the aviaries. There's 12 of them on Santa Cruz, housing the owls. There's 5 owls in that picture. And then hopefully the videos will work as well. Be able to see it. Good idea. So the aviaries are big enough space to give the owls plenty of time to fly around and exercise. And this part of the project is being led by Island Conservation. So it's led by Viv, who's overseeing all this component, supported by the Galapagos National Parks. Oops, there we go. So then on to the finches. I'm going to spend most time talking about this because this is the component that Durrell was specifically brought in to lead on. And so obviously, what I have most knowledge about and what I've kind of been involved in for the last few years. So it all started in 2018. The most important part was recruiting the right person to lead our finch mitigation. And this is that man, Roland Digby, atop his trusty steed, Toro Rocco, on Floriana. Roland is a really experienced field aviculturalist. He'd previously worked on kind of corn bunting reintroductions and captive holdings in the UK with grey cranes, spoonbill sandpiper out in Russia, and Madagascar pochard in Madagascar. And the purpose of the finch mitigation was to provide captive holdings during the period of baiting for 5 species of finch. So the medium tree finch, small tree finch, small ground finch, medium ground finch, and common cactus finch. This work. Oh, there we go. So started in 2018 to 2021, where we ran a series of captive holding trials. And the reason we did these trials was that none of these 5 species of finch had been held in captivity before. So we needed to figure out everything really, how to capture and bring them in safely, how to hold them in captivity, densities, what they need, what to feed them, etc. So that when it comes around to the actual mitigation, we have all those protocols in place. So that was the main purpose of that. Obviously, 2018 to 2021 is a slight hiatus due to COVID. And to do this, we constructed 2 aviaries, one in the lowlands and one in the highlands. As you'll remember, the lowlands and highlands are very different climatically and with vegetation. And the populations of these finches, so some of them like small ground and medium ground, live across the entire island. But the ones in the lowlands and the highlands are viewed as being kind of distinct populations. So we wanted to hold them separately, but also hold them in the climatic conditions to which they are used to. So those captured in the lowlands will be held in the lowlands and those in the highlands. That was done, and through those few years, Roland developed all the protocols to that would be used during the mitigation. And to give you an idea of kind of what the aviaries look like inside, this is a map of one of them. So we have, kind of individual enclosures measuring 4 by 2 meters, kind of food prep areas, and then isolation, hospital areas for where we can treat sick birds when they get ill. So onto the actual mitigation itself. So 2023, early 2023, Roland came back and started with kind of doing all the renovation of the aviaries, making sure they're all up to speed because they've kind of been mothballed for a couple of years whilst waiting for all the funding and logistical necessities to come online to undertake the eradication. We did that. We also, keeping birds in captivity, which we would be essentially from May 23 through till February, March 24, requires a lot of support. And to do this, we needed to recruit 14 volunteers. Some of them are there in the top right-hand corner. And we had volunteers, we had 4 at any one time from essentially, I think, early May through to middle of March to support the mitigation work. Now, the plan was to capture 840 individual birds, so about 100 of each species within each climatic zone. That was the plan. However, 2023 was an El Nino year, which caused ourselves and the rest of the planning team for the Floriana eradication a lot of headaches, because when it's an El Nino year, it's a lot wetter and warmer, which means terrestrial life, including birds on Floriana, breed much, much later. They continue breeding throughout the year. And normally, you'd expect the breeding to finish around April time, so we'd planned to start capturing in May. But they were still breeding. And because of this, we had to change a lot of our delay capture time and then change protocols. Very briefly of why we had to do that. We found during the trials that all the wild finches have gut parasites, something called coccidiosis, which lives in their guts, which they live with fine in the wild. However, when they're under stress, such as being captured and brought into captivity, this can cause illness and death of individuals. Through the trials, we worked out how to cope with it, how to treat it properly, so that we had 0 mortality from this through captures. However, last year when we were bringing them in, because all the birds were still in breeding condition, their hormones, testosterone, estrogen are through the roof, and this combined with the coccidiosis just meant, mortality rate with the usual way we had planned to do it were too high. So we had to, Roland and the team around him and here in Jersey and elsewhere, adapted and came up with a different methodology. Get birds in and keeping it within the threshold that we'd agreed with the park would be acceptable. And it's just an example of no matter how many plans you have, best laid plans, once you get into the real world situation, can go out the window. But in the end, we ended up catching about 524 birds were caught and then held in those 2 aviaries. So once birds are in aviaries, they have to be looked after daily, hence the need for all the volunteers. We had 2 teams, one for the lowlands, one for the highlands. So each team consisting of 2 volunteers and 1 staff member from Galapagos National Parks who'd been trained by Roland during the trial period. And yeah, basically daily routines include a lot of feeding, cleaning, taking fecal samples so we could keep an eye on coccidiosis loads and treatments for them, and some photos of volunteers kind of doing that in the aviaries. And each species had its own kind of specific food composition that Roland had worked out during the trial phase. So as well as buying them on the food trays with bits of apple, grain, quinoa, that kind of thing, also provided things like grasses and lantana, which you'll see in 2 pictures here, which we hung up, which the finches absolutely loved. They'd go mad for it once you put them in the aviaries. And this was put in there both as extra food, but also for enrichment to give them something to do. And you can see the aviaries are all kitted out with kind of branches throughout the structure to give nice variety, give lots of perching spaces, etc. We also trap moths to feed the medium tree finches as well, which is something that they loved having with it. To give you an idea, this should be a video of finches in the aviaries. We kept the species in mixed species flocks in the aviaries, usually at densities of around about 50 per aviary, except for the medium tree finch, which had to be kept at lower densities, 25, just because they're very aggressive and didn't like being in larger groups like that. So that's kind of a very, very brief overview of kind of a bit of the mitigation period. I'm kind of doing this in chronological order, or attempted chronological order. So next phase, whilst all this was going on, and actually beforehand, all the preparation for the eradication was going on, being led by Jocotoco and Island Conservation. So Island Conservation, the technical managers for the sport, and they are a organisation that is globally renowned for undertaking eradications on islands. They have a huge amount of experience on this. But the kind of logistical requirements for this is quite mind-boggling. Over 400 tons of rodent bait was required, which is approximately 40 shipping containers worth of it that had to be shipped from the US down to Ecuador, and then from Ecuador over to Santa Cruz, and then from Santa Cruz to Floriana. 2 helicopters for actually undertaking the baiting, and all this on an island, Floriana, which has limited infrastructure. So this is a picture. All these pictures here are from Chad at Island Conservation. So thanks to him for that. So this is a picture of a truck being brought onto Floriana, a truck which can then carry the containers using basically the old port area, which in his words was not very safe at all. So they ended up basically building a brand new extension onto the main Muelle port area, so that trucks could more safely go and load the containers and then take them off to the storage area. Things like having to build 3 new helipads for the helicopters to actually take part in the operation. There is 1 helipad on the island, but that's there for emergencies and emergency evacuations. And essentially built this whole operations area. So this is an aerial shot from a drone of the ops area. You can see the 3 green squares are the helipads. The black square there is the fuel store for all the helicopter fuel, and then all the rows of yellow shipping containers which contained all the Brodifacoum bait. So the actual eradication itself was done over 3 bait drops. The first being on the 3rd, starting the 3rd of October, second on the 24th, third on the 12th of November. Each application itself took between 7 to 9 days. And then there was a gap in between the baiting operations where the team on the ground could go out, could check the bait uptake, so how much bait had been consumed, weather conditions, redo calculations and make adjustments for subsequent bait drops. So the helicopters you saw on, they would fly with these bait hoppers, which you can see here, underneath them to disperse the bait. And there's one being loaded up. So little forklift loading poison bait into a hopper, which will then be carried by the helicopter to distribute it over the island. The pilots themselves, there were some Ecuadorian pilots from the Ecuadorian Navy, but the lead pilots were all from New Zealand, mainly doing crop piloting, but very experienced in doing this kind of work and have done it kind of all over the world as well. and Chad, who was overseeing the baiting operation from Island Conservation, did say that these were some of the best pilots he's ever worked with. I've got some facts and figures from Chad. It's quite nuts how much stuff was going on. But in total, 410 tons of brodifacoum bait was dropped for the rodents. In terms of quantities, it's different. The way they work it out is basically a quantity per hectare. So it's around 10 kilos per hectare in the highlands, 6 in the lowlands, 9 around the coastal perimeters. It's higher in the highland and the coastal perimeter. That's where the largest rodent densities are. And over about 300 hours of helicopter flights were done to undertake the rodent bait drop. The image on the right, because all the helicopters have GPS on, and they fly basically laser straight lines to drop this bait. And that's an image of kind of the baiting lines as the eradication is going on, showing where's been baited and where hasn't yet. And eventually, that's what it ended up looking like towards the end. Keen-eyed amongst you will notice that there are a couple of gaps in the pink island of Floriana, in the middle there, up at the top, and there. So that is the town, and then these are 2 big water bodies. So to protect those areas from baiting, helicopter flights weren't done over those. That was where hand baiting was done by teams as well. So obviously, once the baiting's done, that's just the first stage. Normally for islands, you can only declare them rodent-free after 2 years, roughly, of no detections. And the way you know that is by doing a lot of post-eradication monitoring. And there's a whole suite of monitoring and detection methods in place on the island. So the picture on the left here, it's Freddie from Jocotoco standing next to basically a camera trap. So it's a camera trap that's linked to the phone network. So these are set up, I think there's about 24 of them, 24, 25 cameras set up across the island. That if they detect something, it'll send a alert to a phone, a laptop, so people can then look at the image and see whether it's a cat or a rodent. Top right picture there is Chad. You can't really see it, but there's 2 blocks around lots of areas, especially around agricultural areas. So these are usually kind of chocolate flavored wax blocks that rats love to gnaw on. So they're monitored regularly. And if there are rodents, you'd expect to see gnaw marks. And then there's bait boxes, which are throughout the town and major tourist points and at entry points to the island as a first line of defense against any rodents. I was speaking mainly about the rodents. Obviously, feral cats are one of the invasive mammals that the eradication was hoping to get rid of. A different type of poisoned bait is used for those, but that will get rid of maybe 80 to 90% of the feral cats. The remaining cats will take probably around a year to get rid of because they're very wily and hard to find. So a number of other methods that are being used for that. On the left, Marcelo, the vet from Jocotoco, with a radio tracking antenna device. So some feral cats were caught and fitted with GPS collars. These are known as sentinel cats. You can then track those animals, find out where they are, and use that to help target your trapping. So using cage traps to find them. And then they've also got a couple of highly trained dogs. That's the right picture there. So one of them is trained to detect feral cats. The other's trained to detect rodents, and they'll be used to help detect incursions, etc. And I said the cats will that cat process is probably going to take another year or so to get those combination of trapping and then hunters with dogs. So kind of process. Right, skipped on a little bit there. So if rodents are detected, basically what this will do is kind of trigger undertaking a detection grid to determine the extent of an incursion, so how far are the rodents. Baiting, broadcast baiting would be done across the area where they're suspected to be and a buffer zone around it in an effort to remove the animals. And then any rodents collected through that process would be sampled and their genetics tested against the original population, therefore to assess whether it is a failure of the eradication or it's a breach in biosecurity to new rodents coming on. So obviously that was all done in October, November, which means that we were then ready to start releasing finches in the start of the year. We had to wait a couple of months after the end of the baiting to ensure that the bait and the environment had completely broken down. And once we'd been given the all clear from the eradication monitoring team, we were able to release finches. So the first release in the Highlands took place on the 1st of February, and the Lowland release took place on the 22nd of February. Before releasing all the birds in the aviaries, we did an initial release of 20 birds fitted with radio transmitters around about a week to 10 days before the main release. This is just to check that there's, they survive okay once they go out of the aviaries. Do they go back to their original territories? Are there any lingering impacts from the bait that we haven't seen? And if you're wondering how you get birds out of an aviary, catch them up to fit with radio tags, this is how, using a very small mist net, setting them up. You then encourage the birds to go into the nets where you can then remove them, ready for checking. And these are a couple of them. There's a cactus and medium ground finch. Basically all birds that were caught in the nets were then kind of given a brief health check to make sure their body condition, whether there's any injuries. Obviously any birds that had injuries or kind of low body condition score, we weren't going to get a radio tag and release, only the healthy ones. They're then taken and kind of radio tagged. Additionally, when we did the main release for the birds, we fitted another 30 birds from each aviary with radio tags. So I think in total we tagged around 100 birds. So this is so we can monitor them post-release to make sure there's no lasting impacts from being held in captivity for, some of them would have been in there for about 7 months, but also understanding how's their behaviour affected. Do they just go back to how they were before? And this is a process of attaching the radio tags, which was done by a team from the University of Vienna. So essentially the picture on the right, you'll see a lady pulling back the wings, basically clipping away some feathers on the back, get the skin, and then the radio tag is then glued onto the back. So this is between the wings, so it doesn't impair the bird's ability to fly or anything. And then the radio tag will fall off basically when the feathers start growing back. And then, yeah, they're monitored by 2 ways. The first way is on the ground, so using trusty Yagi antennas and radio receiver. So each radio tag has a unique signal, so you can then track them down. But we also, or the team, also had a drone, which is seen here on the bottom, which has a VHF receiver on it, so it can, same way as the aerial and handheld receiver can be done, the drone can pick them up. You might be able to see it a little bit on the picture on the right, kind of a beginning of a drone map of when it's flying up, so that's how you monitor it. And the reason for using the drone is it can cover a much larger area than somebody on foot. And also, if anyone's been to Floriana or been to Galapagos, you'll realise that a lot of the vegetation is really dense. You can't get through it. The drone enables us to monitor a much wider area than we would be able to by foot. And the releases themselves were, yeah, they were a big event. It was the end, I think the releases of finches was a real milestone because it was the end of a long process that started many years ago. and it'll signal kind of the end of the eradication bait drop, and the end of this major phase of the work. So both the releases in the Highlands and the Lowlands, all of the Floriana community were invited. Many of them turned up. Lots of the school kids come up. And for the release I was there for in the Lowlands, we had probably about 30-ish people come over from Santa Cruz. So a lot of the senior staff from Galapagos National Parks, from the Biosecurity Agency, from all the partners came to see it, which was really nice to see. And to release the finches in the aviaries, we built in these hatches into the aviaries so you can drop them down from the outside. This just allows the birds to leave in their own time and much reduces the stress on them. Food and water is put on them to encourage them out, but also enable them to have a feed and a drink before leaving, because they're not fed in the mornings as they normally would be, to encourage them to get out. Hopefully, I have a video here of them going down, releasing the aviaries. I don't know if you guys can hear sound, but there is a big cheer that goes up when those finches fly out from that aviary there. Yeah, this was really nice. Apparently in the Highlands, they were a bit more reluctant to leave the aviaries, I think, because it was a bit cold and wet, and they were quite happy being in the warm aviaries. The Lowlands here, yeah, the birds left really quickly and went out. So next one. So I told you, obviously we'd fitted lots with radio trackers. This video I'm going to show you here, which was put together by Shane from University of Vienna. You'd have seen him in the previous photo. So this is an animation of a heat map from the drone search effort in the Highlands and Lowlands, which will show, yeah, basically the drone tracks. We want to look out for where it shows red. That's there we go. The red is where large numbers of signals are being get. So obviously there, that's the Highland aviary. And this is the original sentinel birds. And then this is the big release. So another 30 birds going out. That's the lowland sentinel birds being released and being tracked. And then to get to the 22nd, there should be more coming out. And they all come up. That's a really cool, I forgot to say, I really like seeing that. It just shows you kind of how far the birds have gone. So kind of, if you can see my cursor, that's kind of the Highland aviary around there, kind of like a lowland aviary is around there. So most stay around it. You get some flying out, coming out here, going back territories. And what basically we found is that, yeah, that a lot of them just kind of went back to their territories and back to the areas they came from and got back on with how they were before they got brought into captivity. But it just also shows the amount of area that the drone can cover. There's no way just by using the old method of walking around with your aerials would you be able to pick that up. So that was really cool and a really nice preliminary data from that. So obviously, what were some of the initial impacts post-eradication? So the University of Vienna team, every year they're on Floriana doing nest monitoring for the finch species up in the Highlands. You know, checking for flawness, but also checking nesting success. Obviously, all the data from this year has to be analysed, but certainly when I was over there and speaking with them, some of the preliminary indications was that this year, the first year they'd lost no nests at the egg stage due to predation. So in the past years, there'd been a lot of nest loss whilst there were eggs there, which is an indication that rats predating them. None this time around, which is amazing. And then this bird on the right, a lot of you will recognise, is a Galapagos dove. And this year, first time I think in decades, a pair of Galapagos doves and juveniles have been seen on Floriana. Which is unheard of because in the past, the old Galapagos dove will rock up and turn up on Floriana and then disappear because it'll get taken by a cat. So the fact that that's there, and along with anecdotal reports that numbers of other bird species, such as dark-billed cuckoos, are just higher in number, is really encouraging. As part of monitoring, Durrell are also undertaking monitoring of reptiles, so the lava lizards and geckos. On Floriana, we did a survey pre-eradication. We've done one this year, and we'll do them for the next couple of years. Speaking to Katana, who's been doing that survey this year, then yeah, just reporting a larger number of juveniles. Obviously, we need more years worth of data just to ensure that it's not a one-off thing. From farmers, already noticing the impact from farmers. So pictured here on the left is some germinating corn, which would never ever happen before because it all gets eaten by the rats. And on the right, apparently, is the first whole avocado in living memory on Floriana. Again, they just get chewed holes in by rats whilst they're still on the trees. So already some initial impacts being seen. So what's next? Well, the whole purpose of doing the eradication is so that we can restore some of those missing species to Floriana. And in 2022, undertook a reintroductions workshop there, which assessed 13 species for potential reintroduction to the island. That's a picture of some of the workings going on from the workshop. Okay, so yeah, we've got species kind of in several into broad groups. The 12 species have been identified for reintroduction, kind of the first batch, so to speak, nascently in the first couple of years, probably a bit longer. Floriana tortoise, Floriana racer, Floriana mockingbird, the little vermilion flycatcher, and the vegetarian finch and large ground finch. Tortoise will be the first species to go back, and then likely the two finch species, vegetarian and ground finch, because it's relatively straightforward. The next batch species is probably looking 3, 4, 5 years time. Have grey warbler finch, sharp-billed ground finch, and the Galapagos rail as well. And then ultimately, and this is looking many years in the future, not only because of needing to get enabling conditions in place and it's other factors, and waiting long enough for the eradication to have been done. Galapagos hawk, barn owl, and lava gull as well. And that's ultimately kind of why all this has been done, is to help restore and rewild Floriana. But there's a lot of work to do. But yes, almost more exciting times ahead for that. And just before I finish, I know there's been so many people have funded this, but as I work for Durrell and I've been speaking about a lot of the mitigation work that we've been doing, just to thank some of the donors who've funded, particularly the mitigation work. So Darwin Initiative UK Government, this Climate Walk Charitable Trust, Arran Fund Management Limited, and the Trisanton Trust have all been, particularly good donors to Durrell and our work and the mitigation work that I've talked about in this. But yeah, whole host of other donors. So I'll leave it there. So thank you very much. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, I think myself and Jen will be happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. I think all of us learn a huge amount in that talk. We're so impressed to see the progress happening. Thank you everybody for some really positive, encouraging comments here about, this project really is of worldwide importance. Lots of congratulations for what we've all achieved so far, and lots of excitement for where this project should go. So thank you everyone. We've received a lot of questions here. I'm going to do my best to kind of group them together for you, Jeff.
Thank you.
The first one I'm going to ask is, several people have asked, how long has it taken to prepare for a project of this magnitude? Like, how much work has gone into that kind of preparation?
Yeah. Well, so I asked Chad this from Island Conservation. So they've been the ones kind of leading the eradication component. So he said basically the concept of this for Floriana came around about 2007, whilst they were doing kind of the goat eradication on Project Isabella. And then, as I mentioned, they did some more. There were some other rodent eradications in Galapagos, so on Bartolome, Rabida. And then in 2012, that's when the national park asked Island Conservation, hey, can you look at doing a feasibility study for Floriana? So, yeah, was that 15 years, 12 years, something like that?
Wow. Yeah, and I think for all of us involved, it's such a positive collaboration between the partners, isn't it, as well? Like there's many partners been involved for the majority of that time span. And to be able to collaborate and cooperate on a program this big has been really, really excellent to see. So I have another interesting question here. What were the mitigation measures for any endemic rodents?
Yeah, it's a good question. Easily answered. The Floriana is one of the only islands one of the few islands in Galapagos that has never had any endemic rodent species. There are several endemic rodents in Galapagos, but Floriana has never been one of them. It's never had them. So that was a reason why we didn't have to contend with it. And that's, aside from the size of it, it's would be one of the complicating factors for doing a rodent eradication on, say, Santiago Island, where there is an endemic rodent species still on the island with black rats.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I wonder if also that's why some of the native species on Floriana are more susceptible to the negative impacts of these invasive rodents as well.
Definitely one of the theories.
Yeah, okay. So I have a couple of questions about the owls now in particular. So of the 64 owls that have been taken to be safely kept in captivity, what proportion of the Floriana population do we estimate that is? And also, once they're in the captivity, what are the owls fed on?
Yeah, no, good question. So I asked this question a lot when I was over there as well. We think it's, well, we say 100% of the population, but that's difficult to say because short-eared owls in Galapagos are very strange, as in that they move between islands a lot. So they'll have their home island, as in that's where they'll nest, but they may travel to other islands to feed. Speaking to the team there, they know from owls that were tagged, I think, live on San Cristobal, but one of them goes to Floriana to feed. I don't know why, it just does. So they caught up, I think they caught up all of the owls that were on Floriana at the time when they were doing it. So that's probably the vast majority of the native ones. They may have also caught a couple of ones that are actually from a different island, but would just happen to be on Floriana at the time. And in terms of what they're being fed on in captivity, so mainly day-old chicks. So got a link with a large farm or sorry, egg producer on mainland Ecuador, and they send kind of the day-old chicks, which they feed on, which are fed to the owls. There is a kind of rodent breeding facility on Santa Cruz to try and breed rats and mice to help feed the owls, but that's not been able to produce the numbers required. So sometimes they're fed rodent rats and mice that have been bred in captivity. Otherwise, it's day-old chicks.
Thanks. And the final question we've got about owls in this group is, do you breed them whilst they're captive?
No. So nothing's being bred. So all these are temporary holdings. So the finches are only in there for 7 or 8 months. The owls will be in there for longer, but no, we'll avoid breeding. That's just to keep everything a lot simpler.
Thanks. All right, so now I've got some questions about biosecurity ultimately. So how are we going to guard against rats or feral cats being reintroduced to Floriana? And how do we protect this kind of impact in the longer term?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. It's a really important point. Because ultimately, all of this, I think the total cost for this, I did get this, is about $26 million. It's a massive investment and you don't want it to be too ruined. So yeah, so obviously that I mentioned there was a GEF project in 2018, I think, which was working with the Galapagos Biosecurity Agency to build capacity within that. And that has been done. So it's put a lot of that good building blocks in place. More work and more investment will be needed in biosecurity, certainly, to stop doing it, and measures being put in place. But it's things like, when there's large boats doing searches of boats to make sure there's no rodents on there, and trying to prevent rodents even getting to the island. On the island itself, basically around the main entry point. So it's the town, the port area there, and then there's Post Office Bay, which is a tourist bit up there. Around there, there'll be lots of bait boxes. So these, you've probably seen them around by warehouses and things here. They're like black boxes. They've got poison bait in them, for the rodents. To do that as a first line defense, and then a surveillance. And there'll be surveillance systems, so the cameras and everything else, and then a rapid response mechanism as well. But it is very true, and I think that's one area where there will need to be kind of continual investment and kind of engagement, just to ensure biosecurity levels are maintained and improved as well, because I think these things can always be improved as technology gets better, etc.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's a lot of it is about the communications and awareness and the responsibilities of everybody who's visiting Floriana and Galapagos in whatever capacity, to do whatever we all can to reduce that risk of invasive species of all kinds being moved between the islands. I have a question about cats. So people would like to know, is there a domestic cat population on Floriana? Are the locals allowed to have cats as pets? And how was this handled during the process, if so?
Yeah, so that is, yes, there are domestic cats on Floriana, and yes, people have pet cats. It's generally where the feral cat population came from. Yeah, so this was, I didn't go into it much in this talk because if I'd gone into detail on everything, I think we'd be here for a couple of hours.
Yeah, we could easily talk about it all day.
All day, absolutely. But that's a big thing, and I say there's a huge amount of community consultation and work with the communities gone on over years and years and years on this project. And one part of that was with pet owners. So with the cats specifically, all domestic cats have been neutered or spayed. So it was a vet program. People had their cats neutered or spayed, and it's now law. So people are allowed to keep their cats, but once their cats have died, you're not allowed to bring new cats onto the island. So this is the last generation of cats on Floriana. Once the last cat has died, then it will be cat free.
Is that quite an unusual, like, have you seen that happening anywhere else you've worked before on these kinds of projects? Or?
Yes, I think they did something similar in Ascension Island, in the Atlantic. Gone through a process of spaying cats, and also maybe on Lord Howe Island in Australia. Don't quote me on that one. But yeah, I think where there's islands where there's if you have domestic cats that aren't neutered or spayed, they will breed, and there will be feral, non-feral cats. The cat population will just increase. So yeah, it's the only way to ensure that they can be maintained. I won't say, I think I'm right in saying that that was a challenging component of the project, to get everybody on board with that. People like their cats, want to have their cats. So yeah, I think that was a challenging one for the team members who were involved in that.
So that is a very nice segue to other questions which are about the local community. So people are really interested to hear how have the community been involved in different elements of the project and how has that been prioritized by the partners?
Yeah, I mean, they've been, I think simply to say that the Floriana community have been involved in every aspect of the project. So, um, don't know the details, but in that the feasibility study that was done way back in 2012, one of the big aspects that was looked at was the social feasibility. Um, Normally, eradications of rodents are done on uninhabited islands, so you don't have that issue. Um, but looking at the social feasibility, is this something the community are going to accept and get behind? Because if the community are not behind it, then it's going to fail, no matter what. So yeah, right from the beginning, and then all kind of the workshops going through it. So for example, the non-target species workshop, the reintroductions workshop, there were representatives from the local community involved in there. So also there are members of the local community who work for some of the local partners, the Fundación Jocotoco, Island Conservation, the national park work for them, so on both sides. So yeah, very big part of it. One of the big aspects, I touched on it briefly with the mitigation measures for the agriculture, but alongside that, there's been a big body of work. Floriana, it's one of the poorer islands in Galapagos. So one of the big bodies of work was around all this agricultural development, and this is something that's funded through this Darwin Initiative grant we have at the moment, which is working with farmers to help him basically provide training for improved livestock management, improved agricultural management, both growing but also harvest management, the harvest and then storing of products, so that people will have products that they can then use, but also then sell as well. And also growing things so that one of the big things is looking at growing crops so you can have your livestock feed grown on island rather than having to import it as they have been for ages. So there's a lot of this kind of livelihood development work going on kind of in tandem with the community as well. I'm sure, and
Yeah.
there's a whole load of other stuff, but that's just an example.
I think that's really inspiring to see, and it certainly has been in the design of the program from the beginning that this was only ever going to work and only ever going to work in the long term if the community are bought in and leading elements of it from the beginning, for sure. So it was awesome to hear the news of about the doves already. So like we're
Yeah.
already so quickly seeing these results. Are there like any other, I mean, Galapagos always surprises you, right? Any of you who've been lucky enough to go there, like it's a hard place to predict. But are there other kind of species that we're hoping to see perhaps naturally recolonize Floriana or bounce back in other ways?
Yeah, no, there definitely will be. I mean, the doves is the main one. They're strong flyers. You know, they're on other islands, but obviously they've never managed to take a foothold on Floriana. Hopefully that. So there will be some. For example, the Floriana mockingbird. It's on offshore islands. Probably expect the champion. Yeah, right. The champion's the one that's really close on the north. A few hundred meters away. That may well start recolonizing that north part of the island by itself. I think we'll still require reintroduction intervention to help establish in other parts of the island and also bring population from Gardner. But that's one. Things like Galapagos rail, it's down for reintroductions, but potentially is something that could get there by itself as well. Dark-billed cuckoo, which has been on Floriana and is there. Just anecdotally from talking with people this time around in February, they were like, yeah, they've seen loads more this year. This is from people who've been going there every year for like the last 6, 7 years. So that's just anecdotal. Obviously, all of this stuff is going to, this is why it's important to do kind of post-eradication monitoring, not just for 1 year, but for kind of 3, 4, 5 years, because this year could just be a fluke year, that it just so happens that there's lots there. But yeah,
I think mentioning the mockingbird, so that's a species that GCT have been super interested in for many years, of trying to understand what their behavior is like, what their ecology is like on the tiny islets where they are. And it's very exciting to be close to the time where they might be coming back to the island that they're named after. Someone asked, will there be any captive breeding programs for mockingbirds?
Probably not. Probably not. And that's I don't think we need to for that, because we can bring them straight back onto island. The other thing about mockingbirds and why they'd be really hard to do in captivity, because they're cooperative breeders, so they live in family groups. So they live in family groups, which actually means the whole reintroduction process is going to be quite interesting and complicated. You can't just move individuals, you have to move family groups. So yeah, try and do that, replicate something like that in captivity would be highly challenging. But so I don't think we'd breed in captivity. It'd be about moving the groups. And those aviaries which we built in Floriana can be utilized for reintroduction. So all the bird species we've mentioned can be utilized with those aviaries, to bring them from other islands and using them almost like kind of temporary holding facilities, and then doing soft releases from those. But yeah, no plans at the moment to do mockingbirds. There shouldn't be any need. They should, as long as there's no predators and they've got the habitat, should be fine.
Oh, that's so exciting to hear. Okay, I mean, as we just said, we could talk about it all day. So I'm just going to ask you a final question, and then I think we will be busy with some emails, because there's so many interesting ones that we could go to here. But yeah, the final one, I guess, is a question of Floriana as a case study for the future. So how have you taken lessons that have been learned on some of those other island restoration projects into Floriana? So how have other places inspired this project? And where do you see the kind of data from Floriana and the learnings being able to be applied in the future?
Yeah. Yeah, no, very good question. I think so in terms of where lessons got taken from, I think almost all of the major work that was done. Obviously, island conservation had led with partners number of rodent eradications in Galapagos. On Pinzon, Rabida, Bartholomew, North Seymour. So kind of all those lessons about how things work within a Galapagos setting, and kind of those logistical needs learnt from that. But then lots of other projects. So, for example, I know Henderson Island in the Pacific, that was a rodent failure, but they're almost as important to learn from as the successes. That was a big one. Lord Howe Island, which was done relatively recently, I think, yeah, that's probably only done like a few years ago, was a big one, because that was also doing a rodent eradication on an island with a human population. So that was an important one. In terms of, yeah, kind of even from our side, just our small part, kind of the mitigation parts, there's been the Gough Island eradication attempt, which sadly didn't work recently, but they were holding Gough buntings and moorhens in captivity on island. So a lot of the kind of lesson prep from that fed into ours, and vice versa as well. Roland is friends with one of the people who worked on that. That was all feeding in to it. And then in terms of how this can be applied more broadly, yeah, absolutely. It's such a wealth of knowledge and information that's been developed through this. Sticking locally, thinking big, how can lessons from this be applied to other islands in the Galapagos archipelago? I've mentioned there's things like Santiago, which hasn't got a human population, but is massive, and also has a native rodent. Is that possible? looking forward to other human inhabited islands going on, San Cristobal, Baltra, there's about all these places. Whilst at this very moment in time, probably not feasible for various reasons, can bring on that. But then, the data from this will be, there are databases like island I can't remember what they're called now, island eradication databases and things like that, where data can be uploaded. I fully imagine this will be written up and then both in reports, but also peer-reviewed publications for later, and knowledge shared, through by conferences, forums, etc. So 100%, it's there to be utilised for other ones. I know Island Conservation have other projects in the Pacific where they will be using lessons from this to help inform the design of those as well.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it, and it fits in really nicely with what we're trying to do with a lot of GCT's work, is to support the Galapagos community and managers working there to hold up these case studies on the global stage to help this knowledge transfer and scale up that impact. So huge thank you, Jeff. That was really, really super interesting. And we've already got some requests for a follow-up webinar to hear like how the project continues to develop. I think we've already seen it in the chat, but we are doing another webinar on Wednesday, the 12th of June, this time on our oceans work. And Dr. Alex Hearn will be joining us for that one. That's at 6 p.m. on the 12th of June. A huge thank you to you all for joining us, and for everybody who's given to this project over the years. We really wouldn't be at this stage without all of your support. And a final plug for anybody who's feeling generous to give on our Big Give appeal this week. That will help us continue this work as well. So thank you ever so much, everybody, and hopefully see you at the next webinar on oceans and a future one with Jeff again on Floriana. Let's see.
No
Thank
worries.
you very much.